Neville, can I start?
In about 30 seconds. It's not live on our platform yet.
Waiting.
Okay, we can start.
A very good afternoon, everyone. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 16th edition of India Digital Summit, Supercharging Startups, organized by Internet and Mobile Association of India. The summit is supported by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India, and Niti Aayog. I'm your host for this session, Ayushi Mittal from IAMAI. Welcome to the panel discussion on paving the way for a cashless economy. We would like to thank our digital financial management partner EaseBuzz, conversational messaging partner Gupshup, session partner GoQuick, gold partners Manorama Online, Blink Digital, and Yellow.ai, and silver partner ShareChat. Without any further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Richa Mukherjee, Director Public Policy and Corporate Affairs from PayU, who will be the moderator for today's discussion. Joining us today, we have a great set of leaders. Please welcome Vineet Pujari, VP and Business Head, Startups and SMBs from Paytm Payments Services. Sonika Chandra, VP and Head, Consumer Platforms and Payments from PhonePe. Neha Gupta, Head Issuance from Amazon Pay. And Karan Mashani, VP Payments from EaseBus. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address a few of them in the end of the session. Over to you, Ms. Richa.
Thank you, Ayushi, very much. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 16th India Digital Summit. In the apparent third wave of COVID Omicron sweeping across our nation and the globe, hope all of you and your loved ones are safe and taking all the requisite safeguards and social distancing hygiene norms as well. Today, we are going to have an interesting discussion on the topic, very relevant to all of us, paving the way for cashless economy. And we have with us some of the leading experts as panelists here with their specific inputs and expertise in their respective segments. We can't wait to hear from them. Before I start, I want to just lay briefly the landscape of the digital economy, digital payments, and the economy as such. As we know, India is moving strongly towards a cashless economy and making transactions easier, faster, and simpler for everyone. According to RBI's latest annual report, the total volume of digital payments increased to 98.5% in 2021 as compared to 92.5 in 2017-18. The growth indicates how quickly Indians are adopting the digital revolution in the economy. India's journey for thriving success in the cashless economy has been a mix of both liberal and redistributive initiatives and policies over time by the government and the regulators alike. For liberal initiatives like the increased focus on the fintech and digital payment sector by the RBI, Ministry of Finance, MeitY, etc., with several initiatives like UPI interface, securitization, campaigns like Digital India, Startup India, IPR support, and adequate fundings in STEM. For the redistributive policies which have been consumer come beneficiary focused, the initiatives have been complementary as well, such as DBT, financial inclusion, financial literacy, MSME focused in its incentives, accessible credit, insurance, amongst other. With emerging technologies, intersectoral confluence, and growing patterns of service delivery being offered by governments and industries alike, the scope of India's cashless economy seems to be on upward trend and is imperative for a monumental decade ahead. With this, I move to my panelists for some thoughtful discussion. I want to first start by asking a common set of questions to my panelists. What has been the setback or major bottleneck for the digital payments industry in last few years, especially in case of COVID that has been surging in last 1.5 years? Uh, and how favorable has the government's role been in support and recovery? I want to start by asking this question to Sonika.
Okay, thanks, Richa. So I think, overall, actually, I would, if I think back about the impact of the pandemic, etc., in terms of what the roadblocks have been, I would actually think that from the terms of a digital payments ecosystem and what it has done to consumer adoption, it's actually been a favorable impact. So, if I was to just go back a few years before that and say that, in terms of roadblocks that the industry faced, there were two seminal events that actually helped to address it, right? Consumer adoption is one of the biggest roadblocks that you face in any new technology that comes into the market. And for that, I think the demon that happened in 2016, first opened up the doors to really adoption for digital payments. And since then, and the pandemic that has hit us in the last 2 years also gave it a second jolt in terms of driving, digital adoption. I think what it really did is get people out of their comfort zones, both consumers and merchants. And we saw a difference in that as well. From a phone pay lens, as we looked at our the growth in merchant payments, especially during the pandemic, that's the one that saw the highest quarter-on-quarter growth than than the previous ones. So we actually feel that in terms of overcoming roadblocks, this is we've seen a massive uptick in terms of adoption. We've also seen structural improvements. So whether it's in terms of ecosystem infrastructure improvements, also just the number of people being aware of digital payments. So the literacy, financial literacy has gone up. So these are the types of roadblocks that were in play before digital payments could really take off in India. And I think both the innovation on the public public sector side with the government and the regulators, and the private sector side has really helped to propel it into the next dimension.
Thank you, Sonika. I would ask the same question to Karan. Do you want me to repeat that?
No, so yeah, I think like Sonika said, it's the usual suspects that have been the blocker for a couple of years: the financial literacy, internet penetration, the adoption, and even at Easebuzz, we've seen uptick of of transactions over in the pandemic, as well as the demonetization, where it's kind of forced people out of cash economy, and in COVID, people want to be a little safer with not handing out currency notes. Moving into QR-based payments or link-based payments, or remote, as many remote payments as possible. So we have seen an uptick. Although there have been some sectors where we've seen a little bit of an impact in the digital payment space, but rather actually that's an industry, like travel industry is one of them, which has seen a major hit. So I think once travel is back and COVID kind of this wave passes through and travel gets back to its normal, travel industry gets back to its normal functioning and operations, we expect a much higher, what do you say, adoption in terms of who our merchants are, and just general in the populace, we expect a higher adoption of digital payments. The future, I still see some roadblocks in semi-urban and rural, where internet penetration and financial literacy has not been at that level as yet, where people are still a little scared. There's still lack of trust and assurance that this is safe, and there are chargeback mechanisms and all of these other mechanisms that are put in place by the regulatory authorities. So I think over time, I think we're headed in the right direction into solving those problems and going ahead with that as well.
Thank you, Karan. Vineet, I would pose the same question to you.
Sure. Firstly, I'd like to thank IMAI for organizing this and inviting us all over, and it's a pleasure to be amongst leaders of this industry and participating in something like this. It feels good to step out of your day to day and come out and talk in a forum like this. And I think I'll just quickly kind of give a slightly different perspective to what the contributions have already been made. I think there has been a consumer contribution, and there is a consumer lens which has been already outlined, where we've seen that adoption has definitely grown. However, at the same time, if you look at it from a merchant or a business perspective, I think it has been a challenging time given the pandemic. Generally, we have seen, if not a degrowth, at least a flattish growth, right? And though yes, the transactions have kind of moved towards digital, and we've seen an uptick in certain categories in e-commerce like food and retail, etc. If you look at some of the other categories like travel and ticketing, etc., it has been a difficult time despite these categories having a higher digital adoption, right? So if you also look at the workforce, a lot of the young workforce that was in the tier 1 metros and in the big cities actually moved away from living in metros, and they started to work from home, as a result of which the consumption kind of degrowth a little bit, and though transactions shifted to digital, overall consumption kind of slowed down. But with that said, I think the worst is kind of behind us. We are only seeing businesses becoming stronger and stronger with the passage of time, and they have adopted to this kind of hybrid model where some of their business will operate in a physical domain and some of the business will be more digital, and it's going to be more kind of an omni-channel business. And I think the role of the government, the RBI, the NPCI, and the overall ecosystem has been absolutely phenomenal, right? If you look at the last 2 years, especially how kind of UPI and the Bhim platforms have supported the merchants and as well as the consumers, it's just phenomenal. I'm sure you must have heard about the recent move from RBI, the framework they have brought forward to facilitate the small value digital transactions in offline mode. It's another example. Or even if you look at the wallet interoperability guidelines, these are very strong regulatory and I would say product and business tailwinds that I believe will continue to support our journey in the cashless payments in the coming years.
Sure. Thanks, Vineet. Neha, over to you for your views.
Yes, I think plus one to I think what the other fellow panel members have talked about. I think I'll bring just two perspective. I think I don't think I have any incremental argument specifically about how the ecosystem has evolved thanks to the regulatory and the government enabling frameworks that have been done. Whether I think we talked about interoperability, we talked about including like things like e-mandate and tokenization. I think it's all in the right spirit of the regulations to ensure customer trust and safety and all of that is built. And therefore, I think where I would want to kind of spend more time to truly pave the cashless economy is on two aspects, Richa, is both on the consumer side, because I think it's a very strong adoption initiative that is needed. I think is a one around trust and security. I think that's where I think there is a lot more that can be done. I feel we are just kind of starting up on that, and that's kind of evident. I think UPI frauds is one of the biggest areas that is kind of impacting the industry and customer confidence because of that reason. Other aspects, for example, is around refunds. The timeline it takes if something goes wrong or if I want to cancel a digital transaction. I think the time it takes for me as a consumer to kind of get back my money in itself, I think is a huge element of trust from a customer point of view to move to digital payments. So that is another piece that I would definitely kind of talk about, or we should kind of spend time on that. So that's on the trust aspect that I would talk about. And the second aspect is about, I think, have we made financial services really simple for a consumer? And when we are talking about like tier 2, tier 3 consumers, because I think we are seeing adoption in really the segment which is savvy and active. But I think if we really want to unleash the economy and to a large extent, I think how we are kind of making financial services or payments simpler for a tier 2, tier 3 customers, women in specific. I don't think so we talk about gender as much. I think we talked about, so I think segmentation and solving for customer specific needs as an industry. I think these are the two areas that I think there is a lot that we can do for, and would love to possibly share and hear other perspectives during the conversation.
Sure. Thanks, Neha, for that. And I fully agree with all of your views that while the consumer demand in the COVID times was really flattened, but there was sectoral increase in the demand for consumer as well as digital payment. The growth has not been very pervasive across all the sector. It has been, limited to different sectors. So for us to achieve the overall growth, we really need financial inclusion, whether it involves more women into workforce or unbanked areas, etc. So yes, lots of things to be done. Scale is required, but it also needs to be all inclusive scale that we aspire from here. Vineet, I'll ask the question to you, since you were talking about the small value digital payments, which RBI launched recently, the framework. I want to ask you, how would you see the business efficacy of the same, and how will it serve in the overall goal of digital and financial inclusion? And do you think it can be the digital disruptor?
Sure. See, I believe most of the small value transactions happen to be either impulse purchases, or they happen to be on the go transactions, right? So if you're buying a snack or you're buying your morning milk from the neighborhood kirana store, so network and connectivity, I believe, continues to remain a challenge as we move away from the city centers and the metros, right? So we see a lot of cases of delayed OTPs. We see a lot of failed transactions, which act as a barrier to choose digital as a mode of payment, as a first choice of payment, right? And this has resulted in both customers and merchants preferring cash in such instances. So digital transactions happen to be secondary, and I believe that with this kind of initiative, I don't see this as a disruptor per se, but I think it's more of a logical step needed to make digital payments as seamless as paying cash, even for small transactions. And the fact that the transaction size is capped at 200 rupees, there is absolutely very little risk for the users. And if you think of it, we are just following the same security processes for the ticket size of 5,000 plus for a 100 rupee transaction, right? So I think it's pretty interesting in that sense. And this move has the possibility of moving millions of cash-based transactions to digital transactions, which will drive repeat behavior not only among existing users but also help add new users and merchants to this payment ecosystem. So I think it's quite logical, and I think it's in the right direction.
Yeah, so seamless convenience and timeliness is the key here. Okay, I want to ask this question to Sonika. What are the factors that you believe can be most relied upon when we are working on a consumer-driven payments model? And what do you think has been the secret ingredient of PhonePe where you work in terms of last mile connectivity?
I think, when thinking about from a consumer driven platform perspective, right, I think, actually go back to some of the points that were raised earlier by Neha and Karan and Vineet as well. So overall, see, when you're looking to, the focus is on driving customer experience and customer preference, their convenience, right? How convenient is it to use the platform? Are we serving the needs of the different consumer bases, right? The need can be based on gender. It can be based on which part of the country they live in. It can be based on what socioeconomic strata they are in. What are the types of products that are relevant for the customer, right? So the type of convenience that you can provide to them in terms of based on an understanding of how both financial literacy as well as just overall literacy rates are there in the country. How easy or difficult do you make it for consumers to get onboarded on the platform, right? What all do they need to do to be able to actually start using your products, start using financial products, right? And I think so. So in my mind, honestly, I feel like financial and social inclusion go hand in hand. And the easier you can make that for customers, the faster you will see that they will adopt your services and products. And actually, underlying all of this is the point that I think Neha made earlier, is the point around trust and safety. And that's when, I think when it comes to money, whether it is 200 rupees, 2,000 rupees, or 2 lakh rupees, right? Everybody's concerned about how it is managed, where is it going, is it reaching the right place or not? So I think having that as a bedrock of the platform is what has been really at the, I would say like the secret sauce from a PhonePe perspective, driving their trust and safety in consumer usage. And we have seen that love returned to us by the consumers in terms of, the transactions that happen on the platform. But I think that really is what I would call out, like, convenience, coverage, and the bedrock of trust and safety.
Yes, and I also feel, Sonika, that what you mentioned in the consumer-driven payments model in terms of trust and need-based that you highlighted from PhonePe's perspective, it also works the other way. That while the consumer should also understand what solutions we are trying to solve, what problems we are trying to solve for them. So in that respect, financial literacy and awareness also comes very handy, and that should also be the driving point for the organization like ours, that the far-reaching impact of financial literacy cannot be brought down. It is very, very relevant as we scale up from here.
No, absolutely. I think if the meta goal, I think, from a government and a regulatory perspective, is to drive greater financial inclusion in the country, that will come on the back of financial literacy, and that is a key enabler for anything that we undertake.
Absolutely, absolutely. Neha, I'll come to you. I know Amazon Pay recently started with the BNPL thing, so I would want to we want to hear from you. What are your views on BNPL revolution, and how do you think it can impact e-commerce experience of Indians?
Yeah, thanks, Richa. So yes, I think we launched our BNPL offering about 18 months back, and we are kind of really in that phase that we are learning from the customers. But I think like from the sheer opportunity perspective, I think we all know that roughly about 3.3% of India is really credit penetrated. Otherwise, like we have millions of bank accounts, but the credit penetration. So I think one of the big drivers for driving cashless economy is also to be able to help the customers to be able to kind of get affordable solution. And just from a perspective of an e-commerce player, Richa, where I think the perspective that I can kind of represent is that the next wave of growth for e-commerce is going to be or is expected to be driven from customers in tier 2, tier 3 cities in India who are typically or very largely underserved from a credit perspective. Affordability levers such as installment purchases, whether it is on cards or BNPL solutions or low-cost EMIs, are expected to play a very, very significant role to kind of bring these set of customers into the fold of e-commerce and to provide affordability solutions so that they can make like they can make purchases and kind of really buy the kind of items that they are looking for, whether it is mobile phones, whether it is consumer durable items and all of that. So I think that's really the strong belief that we have on kind of really working on buy now pay later solutions. We are extremely bullish about it. What we are learning at this phase, given that I think we have a very hybrid model of buy now pay later solution that we are offering on our platform for consumers. So right from ranging from small ticket size loans to kind of solve for convenience needs that you buy during the month and pay just once in a month. That kind of a proposition to really affordability solutions. So I think we are kind of dabbling with both sets of options for our customers to see what work. We've seen very, very interesting insights in terms of new to credit customers and how we have been able to solve for
Yes.
the set of customers. So it's not that we are actually cannibalizing the existing set of customers who are already credit served, but we do see some of the experiments and pilots, Richa, that we are doing on helping us get roughly about 10 to 20% of our customers are really new to credit. Of course, like they may be credit served on other platforms, but definitely they were not credit customers on our platform. So that's something that we are seeing, and we are seeing those behavior changes that these customers are then moving to more cashless payments. They are then moving from convenience to high value purchases and all of that. So we do feel that, and as a e-commerce player, we are very bullish about these products and these services, which are to that point.
Thanks, Neha. And as a fintech player and participant, I'm very excited about the BNPL revolution and what it is trying to achieve. And I think in next decade, if it has covered, many far-flung areas, the underserved areas, so that would be the right step in terms of the inclusion as well. Thanks for that. Karan, I want to ask you this question. How ready are Indian businesses to integrate with the fintech solutions? And what are the financial and regulatory challenges for businesses you can see?
So, I mean, that's a it differs from area to area, business to business, and especially the size of the business and where they're located. So, if we are talking about tier 1 businesses, where the KYC is fairly straightforward, and from the regulatory standpoint, there's more awareness, there's more literacy as to what is there. There are fewer regulatory challenges because as a platform, that is what we handle. So, like whether it be the mandate part, like what mandate regulations that are changing, the tokenization regulations that are changing. That is where a payments partner like us come into the picture, where we handle bulk of the regulatory, lift in that what is required. From a financial perspective, so where we see a challenge is that in small businesses, what the challenge is that they've got complex business problems. Like Sonika earlier also was saying, even in semi-urban and rural, their problems are very different. So to invest in technology at that stage, especially when they're starting off, be it in tier 1 where capital is much relatively easier, there's availability is much higher, but even in tier 1 and even in tier 2 and tier 3, the investment that is required in technology initially just to get enabled digital payments and then have those have solutions to their complex business problems. So like example, an educational institute or say tuition classes have, it's not just straight up payments, vanilla payments, which solves their problems. The problem is they've got a form, they need certain, they've got a certain mechanism, there's a certain payment interval, there are certain reminders that are required. So in term that requires a lot of financial investment initially, So what we are trying to do is kind of get at those problems at that core level, and try to solve that and give those products as a package that you can just go ahead with these products for no cost, and just start accepting payments and then scale the businesses, and as and when required. We take care of the payments part, we take care of the entire process, and they focus on the business. So from a regulatory standpoint, just to sum up, bulk of it from what RBI and NPCI and the other regulatory authorities come about, we take care of that. That anyways, we offload that burden of our merchants. And from a financial, we try to make it as easy and as simple as possible for them to solve their business cases with our products.
Sure. Thanks, Karan. And we are left with 15 minutes. So I'll be very quick in my questions, and please also answer briefly to the next set of questions I ask you. I want to turn to Vineet for my next question. What do you think are the challenges that startup in the sector need to be careful while building their company, especially in post-COVID times? And what are the other measures of innovations that you are looking into?
Sure. So first, let me say this. I think all of us will agree here that there has never been a better time to be an Indian startup, right? There is, you just saw a string of unicorns being created last year. We are already the third largest country in terms of number of unicorns. There is ample of funding available in the market. There is ample of problems to be solved in the market, and there is just so much to be fixed and so much to be built upon. And given the fact that India is a youthful country where digitization is rampant, and business models are either getting disrupted or getting restarted, I think it's a great time to be a startup. With that said, I think the fundamentals of how to build a company post pandemic don't really change much. I think the couple of things that would really be critical, irrespective of what time you launch, is first achieving that product market fit. I think as we continue to kind of battle the pandemic, startup will continue to think about the way they are creating value for the users, right? They have to change to the new behavior that the consumers are displaying, and I believe this behavior is going to stick for a while. So the assumptions that we would have had about a user maybe a year ago or 2 years ago would have seen a dramatic shift, and hence businesses which were probably relevant a year or two may not even exist today. So we'll have to kind of adjust to that in that context of product market fit. I think the second fundamental would be that the fact about talent, right? It's all about people capital. Most of the companies are either working from home or are in a hybrid model, and in these times to engage with talent and to keep them motivated, keep them focused is not easy. And building a culture which is not only uh, geared towards welcoming new people, but also rewarding and recognizing them consistently as they kind of contribute and give meaningful impact. I think that's also very important, especially in this context of when people are away and remote. And I think from an innovation perspective, the closer you are to the customer expectation that is not addressed in the market, I think the more likely you are that you will find a solution which will be coming across as innovative. And I think over a period of time, the data and the analytical capabilities have grown multiple folds, and I think that can help you kind of guide your innovation. So we need to get back, you need to get back to more and more often understanding how the customers are engaging with the product and how the landscape is evolving to help you kind of launch those pivots which will help you remain relevant in the context of the market.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vineet. I'll
Sure.
quickly move to Neha. Neha, what do you think incentivizes your users more to use your product? Why not go in for cash rather than cashless? What do you think?
So it is definitely one of our big challenge. I think, Richa, I think as an e-commerce company, kind of pivoting customers or changing their behavior from cash to digital, and specifically as we are talking about like the bigger growth, specifically in this pandemic when offline is kind of really impacted, is coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities. But I think there are 3, 4 things that we are kind of trying to do, Richa. So one, of course, I think building our payment experience in a way, both from a customer experience point of view, that it is simple, seamless, as also I think trust is a very big element. Because it's not, Richa, that cash customers, let's go a step back and understand there is aspiration amongst cash customers to kind of move digital, specifically the youth. And that is something that we are seeing. So they do want to kind of try and experience. There is also value in digital payments that they get. So for example, whether it is no cost EMI or affordability solutions, customers will not be able to get it on cash based payments. So therefore there is added incentive from a customer point of view in itself to kind of move to digital payments. So the key thing is if we can make our experience super seamless, really trusted, solve for the key pain points on whether when they make a payment, if they were to cancel the order, we should be able to refund the item instantly or give the money back to the customer instantly. I think working on those experiences. Secondly, of course, building rewards as a very integral pillar of the strategy because it's important to drive consumer change. That is something that we're doing. And unblocking financial services for them. So say, for example, credit. So there is a line of sight that we can show to the consumer that the more you are digital on our platform, the more we'll be able to kind of really help you get financial products and services that really suits your needs. I think these are the three levers that we are kind of really building our payment strategy on to incentivize users to move from digital payments to more and more cash payments to more and more digital. And of course, I think the journey really starts when the consumer wants to make the payment. The nuance around it is that are we really driving customers to make payments at the checkout itself, or are we enabling solutions of which kind of provides trust, convenience, affordability at the time of delivery? So that is another big innovation, Richa, that we are doing to be able to kind of really start building habit from where they are comfortable and then kind of move them in the journey to more like on checkout experiences versus like at doorstep payments and all that. So I think that's really what we are trying to do to be able to change that behavior and journey. But it's a long way, Richa, that I can definitely share from our experience as an e-commerce player. That specifically to gain that trust and confidence from a customer whose habit is still cash, I think is a journey in itself.
Yeah. It would be very interesting to see those kind of behavioral changes happening in the, in the target audience that you're driving. I can see the questions pouring in, so we'll be quick. I want to ask you this question, Sonika. PhonePe has digitized many small merchants and kirana stores. How important do you think is the economic capital of small businesses for the growth of digital payments industry?
I think I'll answer it briefly, but I think it goes without saying, and everyone will agree that it's absolutely critical because I think the small businesses really stitch the fabric of commerce in India together. And it's critical for us as we move forward to make sure that we bring them into the digital fold without really impacting the business model. And I do believe, I think as Karan was mentioning earlier as well, that I think as the cost of tech comes down, we are looking at developing an ecosystem where you'll have more of an open distributed commerce, which is different than what the model that has played out in the West. And I think it's the convergence of the cost of tech going down, the cost of other whether it is the connectivity going up, people having more access to digital assets, etc. That is going to come together to allow us to do that in a distributed manner versus it becoming a monopolizing medium. So I definitely think that that's something that we believe is going to play out in a big way in the future.
Thanks, Sonika. So my last question to Karan from the panelist. Karan, do you think that the challenge of cybersecurity in digital payments requires both technological and regulatory intervention? And where do we strike the balance here?
So the way I look at it is it's more than a balance, it's actually more of a collaborative effort. It's both regulatory and it's basically a technological problem, which is cybersecurity, but the regulatory framework kind of keeps that in check, that the processes that are set, like example, RBI has got the PAPGs, they've got certain audits that are mandated for PAPG guidelines, there's the SAR, there's a PCI DSS. There are other audits that are in place which are mandated to the to organizations, and the regulatory framework kind of keeps that in check, that all of these are being handled. And it goes hand in hand, and I think we're still early stages. There is still a lot more to be done. The technology companies, like we've kept security as, like we've been talking about trust for the last half an hour or so. Trust comes with security. The moment there is a breach, it's not just one company, it's the entire industry, because then the consumer thinks maybe online payments as a whole is not safe. So security is a core business function. And if we keep that as a core business function, our role as technology players is to make sure that we strive to be better at all times. all our processes, there are no gaps. If there are any gaps or leaks in the processes, in the systems that are the guidelines that are set out, we plug them and we go maybe 1 or 2 levels above. The regulatory framework, I believe the RBI has got a proposal for having a separate division for payment aggregators and the entire Payment Settlements Act, a separate division to kind of oversee that. So if that comes into play, then we'll see more guidelines and more stringent, like a maker checker setup, where there's more control and accountability, that all technical players, all technology players kind of do their part in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Karan. I'll take some of the questions from the audience that I can see coming. First question is, India FinTech has made great strides. How does India Inc. take this success story to other countries and go global? Anyone wants to take that?
I think I can start. So I think two parts to that answer. I think one is that there are still great strides to be made in India itself. I think we have just scratched the surface. And I think as we've been talking about for the last half an hour, there is so much to cover in the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 markets, different consumer segments, etc. That I think a lot of, I mean, I can speak for us personally. I think there's a lot of focus on how we can serve more and more customers here in the country itself. I think that said, there is, from whether it's from a UPI perspective or others, I think as we take the technologies outside the country, I think we do want to make it easy for Indians wherever they go to be able to have the same ease and convenience of use, in whichever country, they're able to use the same product. So, but I think the big story is still India. It's Bharat. It's the next leg.
I agree with you, Sonika. There are still so many milestones to be still achieved. So much scale still has to happen that we rather focus on India, and then of course the best practices can, they can travel in the world. Next set of questions is quite interesting, and of what we have been seeing in the newspaper also. While there have been lots of tailwinds supporting the cashless economy, burden on telecom infrastructure, network continues to be a hindrance in many large and small cities, leading to transaction failure. Are there any thoughts or plans to work with telecom providers to strengthen the networks?
I think I wouldn't have a response to how we are kind of partnering with the telecom infrastructure teams, but at the same time, we hinted at the innovation from a regulatory perspective, right, where we are able to make payments in a network-free environment, right? So that's just an example of how we will have to find ways to facilitate payments and to facilitate transactions in the absence of infrastructure. So while that is not an ideal place to be, I think we will probably find some use cases where we will be able to bring in more and more customers and also create use cases of repeat customers when network is not great. But at the same time, I think this definitely deserves a little bit more attention on how we solve for the long term, because everybody here spoke about Bharat, right? And to enable Bharat, I think that is a critical lever.
Thank you, Vineet. In the interest of time, I'll have to conclude the session. It was wonderful catching with all the panelists and with the audience as well. I want to conclude by saying that India is a country with largest number of young population under 25. It's about 600 million, and we have 500 million as internet users. So sky's the limit for digital or cashless payments to scale from here. All I wish is that being part of the industry, I want to ensure that when the cashless payment ecosystem scales, it is secure, safe, resilient, and covered the unbanked parts of the country, making it truly inclusive growth and play a pivotal role in making India a $5 trillion economy by 2025. With this, we come to the end of the session. My sincere thanks to all the panelists and IMAI for providing us with this opportunity for the wonderful session. Thank you. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this engaging session. Special thanks to our moderator and our panelist. Another thank you goes to all our attendees for being here and making this possible today. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.